Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuh. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah. I'm going to discuss today this idea of mental models, which is now coming into prominence in social psychology and motivational psychology, where this idea of mental models is being developed and being understood, and how this is perceived to be the way forward, especially in changing our perception and our idea of our questions of achievement, of success, of direction, of life, and so many of these mental models, ideas that is being developed right now. But what do we say as Muslims? And this is where you will shock you. 1,000 to 800 years ago, 800 to 1,000 years ago, we Muslims has developed that. So our great scholars like Imam Ghazali, Ibn al-Qayyim, and all the others, they have developed this idea of mental models. Only thing couched in the language of their time, all right? And one of the best books that you can understand and distill this idea of mental models development from the perspective of psychology and Islamic psychology is actually this book by Professor Said Naqib Alatas. He is the founder of ISTAC. All right. His book, Prolegoma to the Metaphysics of Islam, an exposition of the fundamental ideas of the worldview of Islam. All right. Professor Said Naqib Alatas, founder, director, International Institute of Islamic Thoughts and Civilization. This is, and also the chair of the Al-Ghazali Chair of Islamic Thoughts. All right. So ISTAC is one of the great institution in Islam, set up together with IIU, International Islamic University of Malaysia. And this man, Alhamdulillah, he's still alive. Said Naqib Alatas is an old man, but he distilled these ideas of all the great Muslim scholars into this book. So those of you who want to study Islamic psychology, go back to this book. But it's very in-depth, very philosophical, but the theoretical framework even includes the idea of mental model. So how can we say about this idea? So I just read one small passage from his book. So he talked about, all right, the powers that is particular to human being, to animals, and so on. And for human being, as for the perceptive power, this comprises of the 5 external senses. Al-Hawas, in the developmental order of touch, smell, taste, sight, and hearing respectively. These perform the function of perception of particulars in the external world. In addition to these 5 internal senses which we perceive internally, the sensual image and their meaning combined with other conceived notion preserve the conception of that we conceive. So the perceptive power of the internal may be classified into 3 kinds. Some perceive but do not retain their objective. So there is this whole idea of perception, where we can then understand in terms of the image or representation that we have in our mind. All right. So he says, the existence of the internal senses is established by the way of intuition, al-wajjan. The first of these internal senses receive the information brought in by the external senses and combine and separate internal images or representation of the external sensible objects. It is the common sense, al-his al-mushtaqraq, also called fantasia. This common sense directly receive the data from the 5 external senses, then present it and perceive it through our internal imagination. So this internal imagination then create a representation of the sense of the object. All right, and its recorder is sensitive imagination, al-khayal, or representative faculty, al-khalaliyat. The common sense may further note that it received this data from the external senses, gathering similar or dissimilar ones, whether it is good or bad or real, and so on. So you can see that basically there are many more in this book telling about this nature, where we are getting our from the realm of the absolute, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm taking from this book, the absolute active intellect. So from the realm of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we know that Allah is the creator. He is the creator of our roh, our kap, our akal. So our akal is the active intellect, but not the absolute active intellect, because the absolute active intellect is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the sifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because intellectualization is his sifah. And from here, he gave us the format towards understanding of revelation. This is where our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam received it from, his wahyu, from Archangel Jibril, inspiration. We get inspired every now and then from our inner thought, our inner speech. We get ilham from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from the realm of Allah, from the realm of the angel, from the realm even sometimes bad ilham, we don't call it ilham, but we call it waswasa, from the realm of shaitanic realm. We get intellectualization of our knowledge. We get worldviews developed. So all these are developmental models of mental models in motivational psychology and social psychology. So how are we going to frame it up within the ummah? All right, I'm talking this aspect from the perspective of the Islamic mental models. There are so many varied Islamic mental models in the world today. What is the most relevant for the ummah in the 21st century? Which mental model that we're going to develop? Then we can discuss that. All right. Then we have other mental models, whether it is religious mental model, humanistic mental model, neoliberalism, socialism, greed for all mental model, hedonistic mental, what? So many other mental models within this competing system of mental models as we live in this life. So this is explained in our system. That means in our book, Positive Islamic Psychology, we have our model. And this developed the Islamic mental model. We have, this is the diagram you can read. You can see here we have the input from our physical environment, the impact on our self, our total past learning history, both our spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical self. Then we have the inter-social and intra-social. Then we have our inner speech, and how this is being developed to become the internal mechanism to build up our mental model that is relevant for the ummah in the 21st century. That's why, inshallah, we can use this book as a basis of developing our idea of mental models. So, what is important is for us to understand that if modern psychologists talk about mental models, whether it's social psychologists or motivational psychologists or success motivation using this concept of mental model, it is inherent within the tradition of Islam. Only thing, because we did not develop the idea of psychology within the framework of modern psychology, we Muslims were a bit left far behind. We did not understand this, whereas this whole idea has been distilled by Muslim scholars. As I mentioned, the whole list in his bibliography, there are more than 50 Muslim scholars of the past that he has extracted, from Imam Ghazali to, all right, Nuruddin, and so many. All right, you can see his bibliography. All these are distilled to give us the idea of the worldview of Islam. This worldview is what we call, in psychology, mental model. Okay, so I will describe this idea one by one, and we will distill using the various methods, the various tools of how we can to find what kind of Islam you're talking about and what kind of world we are talking about. So we can start with the world first. What are the mental models of the world? Today we have, all right, neoliberalism. All right, so this is the mental model of, for example, Donald Trump and his supporters in America. So this is a very narrow, only me first, me first. So that actually is a very, very selfish way of looking at the world. All right. So you have neoliberalism, you have socialism. People who believe in communism and then move on to socialism. All right. And they say that we must share, make everything equal, but actually it's not equal. All right. So you have this model now operating in China. You have this model now operating in Russia and many other parts of the world. All right. Then you have this hedonistic Western type of lifestyle. Anything goes, free for all, based on greed. So this is where we have the model of this world today, that is, this civilization is likely to be self-destroyed within the next 100 years, because we are actually destroying our whole civilizational structure, whether it's a social structure, whether it's the environmental structure, whether it's the structure of a balance life, is everything is being destroyed, because when you have no rules, everything is game for you to change and do anything and everything, then what is the outcome? The outcome is a progression towards degeneration. This is the law of physics, all right? And it will create chaos, and from chaos will come destruction or annihilation. This annihilation could come from, for example, because as we go on greed, become greedy, so some so-called superpower in this world thinking that it is viable for them to bomb another country and the other country will bomb. So we have the Third World War. That is a possibility. In fact, Elon Musk says that is more of a possibility now because of the what? The selfishness and the greed of that is imbued in the mental models of modern humanity, which is wrong. All right, so we have to develop a positive global mental model for humanity. All right, and more so, we have to develop a positive global mental model of the Ummah, which I will describe. So now I'm giving you a summary of the other mental models, whether it's religious, humanistic, neoliberalism, socialism, greed, free for all, hedonistic, and many other. Each and every one of us have our mental model. Every human being that lives on this earth will have his or her mental model. So his or her mental model may be shaped by what? His environment, social, and the inner speech. So for example, if he lives in a slum, he will find the idea of gangsterism, drug addiction, selling of drugs as a viable way to survive. So that is his or her mental model in a slum. In the ghettos of America, or in the slum of Africa, or in the slum of Southeast Asia, anywhere in the world. All right? Then we have the more positive mental model of seeking knowledge, doing science, doing research. So this is a better part of our human endeavor. So what is the mental model first that we have to develop for the Ummah and for humanity? Naturally, we have to develop a humanistic mental model. And how to develop this humanistic mental model based on not just me, but we and all of us. Now there's a lot of organizations, NGOs, individual thinkers, scholars, psychologists, philosophers thinking about this humanistic model for us to save this 21st century civilization from self-destruction. So how does then we as Muslims have our mental model? Because we have many alternatives. We have this isolationist type of Muslims, we have the political type of Muslims, we have the confrontational type of Muslims, we have the liberal type of Muslims, we have the humanistic type what? So I'm going to give you some idea of using some tools, questioning tools, for us to find a via media as an idea of developing this concept of mental models, so that inshallah those of you who are interested in developmental psychology, motivational psychology, social psychology, can then fuse this idea within Islam, already 800 to 1,000 years ago, already summarized by our great philosopher, scholar, Professor Said Naqib Al-Atas from ISTEC. And from there you can do your studies, and you can see how much that we can contribute to the Ummah in the 21st century. So inshallah, I'm just giving you a preview, and inshallah in the next video I'll tell you what are the ideas that we can use, the questioning technique in which we can use in our mental model analysis to us and for us to understand that we have a meaning and purpose in life, that Allah created us as a spiritual being living temporarily in the physical world, and that we are created to realize His grandeur and glory, to be His true abd, His servant and His Khalifa on this earth, having only the three goals in life for us to complete with the greatest of all our effort to build our mental model based on being the Khalifa of Allah, striving to make ourselves good, helping others to be good, making the world good, inshallah.